Welcome to Inner Noise episode 7. My name is Gabriella Jones and I'm a concert harpist based in London. I am disclosing that this is the second time I'm recording this episode because I got pretty much to the end and decided I was so unsure of everything that I'd said that now I wanted to re-record it. So here I am. I'm recording this at the end of January, and I won't lie, I've had a lot of inner noise swirling around my little head. So I just decided that I wanted to sit down and reflect on a book that I read towards the end of last year and just give it the time it deserves. So it's called On Purpose, 10 Lessons on the Meaning of Life by Ben Hutchinson. So like with every podcast episode, I like to give a little bit of context as to why I'm wanting to talk about it. So that is what I'm going to do first. So when I got this book, I was having a period of just feeling really uninspired, and I feel a little empty when I'm not kind of fueled by something creative and passionate around me. I really find it hard just to even kind of go through the motions of freelance musician life without those things. Hence my art and culture days that I discussed in either the last episode or the one before that. So basically I was looking for some inspiration and someone suggested Patrizia Cavalli's poetry collection to me. And I was playing at Cadogan Hall, and I decided between the rehearsal and the concert of the project I was doing, I was going to go to Waterstones on the King's Road and I was going to find this poetry book. So anyway, here I am now in the poetry section, and there's a guy there buying a poetry book for a date he was going on. He had absolutely no clue, which did make me beg the question why he was kind of doing that in the first place. But you know what, I thought that is very romantic, it's very Notting Hill of you, so I'll allow it. Anyway, but I heard one of the staff suggesting some poetry to him, and I just really loved the way she was speaking about the poetry. It was like from a very kind of less, I guess, intellectual place, more of like an emotional, like her connection with poetry, etc. And it was just really lovely. So anyway, once she'd finished speaking with him and he got his lovely poetry book with a gorgeous cover, which I think is why he actually bought it in the end, I decided to go and speak with her and ask her whether she had this book in stock. They didn't, but she then asked me why I wanted the book, and I said I was just feeling slightly uninspired in my kind of creativity and I was looking for some inspiration. And she said that it was a great book, but she said seeing as that wasn't in stock, that she would recommend this one. So I trusted her suggestion, and I'm just so glad I did. This book just offered me this sense of like warmth and sanctuary. I think I finished it in less than a week, and I just really wanted and have wanted to, since I read it, just share my thoughts on the pages I folded down and the pencil scribblings I made along the way. So here we go. That's what I'm about to do, and I'm really hoping that I don't have to delete this version of this episode because I'm feeling self-conscious. So yeah, I think when I saw that it was On Purpose, 10 Lessons in the Meaning of Life, I was a little bit like, rolled my eyes a little bit, because it felt like maybe a self-help book. And I guess in some ways it kind of is, but maybe less like, I don't know, those podcast titles that are like, 3 ways to get $10,000 in your bank account, or like, are you drinking carrot juice every day so you walk 5 miles an hour quicker? Like that kind of stuff. I hate that stuff. But I felt like I really trusted this lady's recommendation for whatever reason, and she said she couldn't put it down, and I certainly couldn't. So one page in, I was just like started underlining things straight away. I underlined page 1, culture is comparative, greater than any of us, and we are what we articulate, if only to ourselves. Our self-image is our self-imagination. And I just love this. I just really love this. Like, it just makes me feel like I'm part of something that's bigger. It doesn't make me feel so like self-focused in some ways. And then in the other sense, it's like a reminder that like how important self-talk is, and what we say to ourselves, and how we action what we say to ourselves is just so important, because self-image is our self-imagination. It's that can be broken down in so many different ways, how we see ourselves and how we want to, and then, you know, like, I guess the big dreamer, you know, I'm quite a big dreamer. I'm someone who I feel like I dedicate so much of myself to my art and what I do in so many different ways, and it just really struck a chord with me. And I think immediately it felt like when you read insights or people say things to you that just feel like they're taking a weight off your shoulders and just making you feel really deeply understood. And even as I read those little quotes out now, it just feels really good. I think sometimes it's easy to be really absorbed in our current, and when I say current, I actually mean current as in like our present, and also as in current like the flow of life. And I think thinking of a bigger picture can just really help us recenter. So in many ways this book made me feel inspired, but it also was really soothing and centering to read. Oh, all good things. So he writes, we can't predict the future, we can't call up certainty, we can however inject ourselves with insight, we can inhale imagination. And I just think there's another little quote coming up, but I just love the way he writes. I think I'm not sure what the English I'm not sure I've even said this actually anywhere, but my whole education was in Welsh, so I sometimes struggle with knowing what the words, I mean, I really could Google this, but what it is when you use this in writing, in English writing. But calling up certainty, I feel like the way that he's written that, it's like almost ridiculing certainty a little bit. Like, of course you can't call it up, but of course you kind of don't want to, you know? Like, there's something really fun in not having something certain, and I think there's so much lightness in that. And then I think the way that he said inhale imagination, like, it makes it feel like imagination is so easy. It kind of reminds me of like how easy childhood is, of like just imagination, you know? It's like, oh, could you just draw a picture of the seaside, and it's like that seaside could be anything. Could you just draw a picture of, and like children just draw, don't they? And it's just with so much ease. And then as an adult, like, imagination feels so much harder because so little of life is imaginative in so many different ways. And I think this idea of like inhale, exhale of imagination just feels brilliant. Like, it just feels so beautiful. And I think it really encapsulates the beauty of creativity for me. I think it's never easy when you're living a freelance career to feel like it's not never easy. It is easy when you're living a freelance career to just feel like you're part of a machine and going through the motions and trying to make the best choices for your finances, your brand image. And creativity can sometimes not go hand in hand with those things. But I think feeling like you're contributing to something greater, and something that's timeless, and something that is uncertain, but the journey is part of that, is just really humbling, uplifting, and it just makes me feel really grateful that I'm actually even able to do this. So then another little quote that I loved, again, I think in the way that he writes it, he wrote, prisoners of our own perspectives, we're also editors of existence, giving rhythm and cadence, rise and fall to the parameters of our life sentence. Perhaps we just need to think about life as though we are writing it. And I think that resonated with me, probably because of the heaviness of it. I think using like prisoners and life sentence, I think sometimes, as he said, inhale imagination. Creating music and being a creative and being a freelancing musician can feel so liberating, but I think it can also be a burden, not only in the lifestyle that you live, but also the way in which you have to make sacrifices for that life. And dedicating yourself to any kind of art form does mean that maybe you're getting closer to an understanding of yourself and getting closer to this idea of perfection, which somehow feels good. But I think there's like a dichotomy, because you're always wrestling with kind of being the, as he calls it, like the editor of your own life, and the freedom that comes with that, as well as feeling caged in sometimes, you know, because sometimes I feel like maybe I want stillness, or I want to get out sometimes, you know. I don't mean get outside the house, I mean get out as in like I don't want this anymore, because sometimes it really feels like a burden, but then equally I feel like I can't escape it. So it's a bit of a funny one. There's actually this really lovely Welsh poem that I love called Hon, and it does not translate well into English. It doesn't have by any means the same kind of meaning as it does in Welsh, but it's talking about being Welsh being a burden, and equally not being able to escape it because it's who you are. And sometimes it feels, you know, music and being a musician and being a creative and feeling like I'm contributing to art feels so much like it's part of my identity. Sometimes it does feel like a burden. So I think he really writes that so well there, and I really like the way that he's written it, because I think it really truly paints this picture of like the depths of it and how it can make you feel, from the perspective of the brightness, the imagination, to the kind of life sentence that he uses. He talks a lot about drifting and kind of not having purpose, as well as the idea of having purpose. He says, you know, so many of us drift into jobs, relationships and ways of living because they are there without ever really taking the time to stand back and work out whether we want them. And he also talks about, in literature as in life, desire is what pushes us forward. We want to know what happens next. The pleasure is in the yearning, not the destination. And I think it's always really relevant, because sometimes we're in a rush, and I think especially nowadays with everything so fast paced and quickly changing and moving, I'm constantly thinking about, well, once I've done this, what am I going to do next, and what's the next goal? And I often wonder, will I ever feel just done? But then I wonder, is the beauty and the want and the desire and the passion and the fire in the chase itself? And sometimes I do feel like I'm longing to just feel content, to just think, okay, is this good? Like, can I relax now? Can I take my foot off the gas? But then equally, on the other side of that, it makes me feel really anxious, and I worry that actually I wouldn't be able to handle the stillness. So I guess the thought of drifting worries me, but so does the relentless fight against it. So it's a really tricky one. Like I kind of want to just leave that there, because I don't know. I just really don't want to ramble at all after I've now re-recorded this episode. And I guess in a way, maybe this episode is just a whole load of thoughts and absolutely no answers, but that's kind of how my mind works anyway, hence the not being able to be still. Hence trying to gig, teach, record a podcast, upload a vlog every Sunday, and have quite literally on a mood board in front of me 4 creative projects for the year. So that is where I'm at. Anyway, I'm going to continue. At some point he quotes Kant, and this quote I love. Art is good for nothing. It exists for no reason other than for itself. In this, art is like life. It must create its own purpose. And it just reminds me of how connected both of those things are, how connected art and culture is to the ebb and flow of life. It feels like in so many ways it's independent of societal hierarchies or material gains or life in general, but then at the same time it's so connected to it. And I started to write my thoughts on this, and I was kind of going around in circles, because art and culture depict history, they depict the depths of emotions, it depicts true life, and yet sometimes I feel like the fast-paced nature of living in London as a city, for me personally, I feel like it's neglected in so many ways, even though there's ample of it around. And maybe in some ways I feel like people would rather just snap a picture of it for Instagram and walk on by than give art a moment to kind of infiltrate them, because it can just be so nourishing. And I really worry about our culture and culture in general and art in general when I see this, because it makes me, and this is the part in the last recording of this episode where I got a little bit tongue-tied, because what I'm really trying to say and what I'm trying to do is dissect maybe something so philosophically deep that I actually don't have the brain cells and intellect for it. But I think what I'm trying to say is that I wish that people could allow thoughts in a little bit more and sit with them. And I actually am talking probably more so about people who aren't creatives and people who don't create art, because I guess my question that popped into my brain is, what do we live for if it isn't for love and for the worry of losing the things we love and seeing the most beautiful things in nature, or to be lit up by a place or a person or an experience we've never seen, met or had before? And I think that these things, art and life, go in hand, just like they feel as one, and it's so easy to disregard both and to drift in life and to not experience and not be like truly present. And I guess in a way this is kind of like something you could even meditate on the thought of, in a way, this Kant quote. But again, I'm just going to park that there. I'm going to leave my somewhat unaligned thoughts with that little he goes on to write about finding your narrative arc. It's actually the title of one of the chapters. And he says, finding your narrative arc also means losing it first. And this really resonates with me. I mean, I've lost my narrative arc so many times, and I don't want to kind of dive into it too personally, but I think that sometimes rediscovering what you're meant to be doing and what you should be doing can be really painful and like really vulnerable. And you have to be, maybe, to really rediscover it again. But I think you can be so empowered by it. And he just discusses, like, he goes on to talk about the stories we tell ourselves to live and the way we live to tell those stories. And he's really cautious about idealized happy endings, and just encourages us to like embrace different arcs, ones that align with who we are in the present, but also ones that align with who we're becoming. And I guess actually moving on really well is my next quote, where he's writing about ambition. Is he says, to aim high is not just to accept that most of the time we'll miss, but to expose ourselves to shame, humiliation and desire. So again, with the narrative arc thing, it's like you can create this arc, but sometimes, you know, it does finish. And sometimes it finishes not because we've decided it to, but because something's gone wrong. But you can create another one. And is always about the trying, and sometimes there's so many lessons learned in failure, and I'm not sure if I used the word failure per se in my episode. I think it was things I learned in 2024. But I think when you try and you get, I think it was talking about rejection, you get rejected or you experience failure or something goes wrong, you can either kind of seep into that and just be like, okay, well, I'm kind of good for nothing, like I can't move past this, like I won't try again, there's no point, blah, blah, blah. Or you can redirect, or you can actually just try again because maybe the timing wasn't right for you, or maybe the situation wasn't right for you. Like there's so many things that come into success and succeeding, or actually not even those words, but just something going right. So yeah, I guess there's vulnerability there, and I think putting work into the world as a creative risks failure, not only by other people's standards but also by our own, our preconceived ideas of how we want something to go. But I think it makes the process meaningful. And it can create really pivotal moments in our life, actually. If you combine the two thoughts of aiming high and possibly missing, and also this idea of the narrative arc, I think is really like a really wonderful little life lesson. There we go. That's what his intention was. I'm going to end this podcast episode here. I'm slightly self-conscious that I've just kind of thrown out a load of thoughts into the universe and I've not really come to any conclusion, or maybe there was no rhyme or reason to it, which I feel like I'm doing a lot with these little episodes. But it just feels really good to discuss this book. I think when I think about the lovely house that I'm going to own one day with an amazing huge bookshelf, I think about this book being on it, and I think about this time sitting here talking into this microphone about this book, because it was brilliant. And I have highlighted very few things actually in comparison to all of the amazing stuff that Ben Hutchinson wrote in the book. And I would just encourage everybody to go and buy it because it's just such a lovely read. And I feel like whether you are so inspired at the minute and you are empowered by the sense of the 1st of January and the start of this new year and all of the endless possibilities, or whether you're like me and you've actually got loads to do and you are doing it but you're maybe not feeling amazing and feeling empowered and feeling confident in what you're doing, or even questioning, as I've done a lot of this month, whether actually this is all even right for me. I think that there is so much in this book, and whether you are a creative or a non-creative, or you're even thinking about becoming a creative, I think there is a lot of inspiration and thoughtful reflections on life, art and literature. So thank you for joining me on this episode, and until next time, in the words of Mr. Hutchinson himself, live, read and reflect on purpose. Bye.